Hello. So today we are finally going to join Israel and the diaspora. So finally join together and read reach the same point. We're going to finish Sefer Vayikra together. In Israel, we are going to read Parashat Bechukotai. And in America and other places we'll read Parashat Bechukotai. And so today we'll focus on Parashat Bechukotai. Those of you who want to see a MyDrash post about Behar, you're welcome to take a look at last week. Okay, so without further ado, let's finish Sefer Vayikra. There's a sort of kind of midrash that comes up a lot in different places. That has to do with the giving of the Torah. That when God gave the Torah, then the angels rose up and said, "Wait, why are you giving the Torah to man? Give the Torah to us. We are the angels. We should be the ones to have the Torah. Why are you giving it to man? Man is such a lowly creature." And so, for example, in the Psikta Rabbati, which is another source of midrashim, God turns to Moshe and tells him, "Moshe, respond to the malachim, respond to the angels, tell them why it is that men should have it." And men and women, of course. So it says that Moshe turned to them and said to them, "Katuv b'Torah, Anochi Hashem Elohecha, klum Elohim yesh lachem." God says, God shall be your Lord, Hashem shall be your God. Do you have any other gods that you could choose from? You're angels, you're perfect. כתוב בתורה, לא יהיה לך אלוהים אחרים. חלוקה יש לכם, שתי רשויות יש לכם. כתוב בתורה, כבד את אביך ואת אמך. It says you should honor your mother and father. אב ואם יש לכם. Do you have a father and mother? כתוב בתורה, לא תחמוד. חימוד יש לכם. The Torah talks about לא תחמוד, about not to covet. Do you even have the sense of coveting? So Moshe answers sort of the obvious answer, which is that the Torah is talking about human beings living in this world. And it's not talking about angels. And all these mitzvot are relating to situations which don't exist for angels. In our parsha, and in the midrash we will see in a moment, we have a similar story. This time it's Hashem arguing with the angels, but with a bit of a different twist. In our parsha, the parsha ends with the story of Elchin. Elchin is, the term erech has two meanings. It means value, and that's the way that it's used at the end of the parsha, where a person comes along and says, I want to donate myself, my value, to the Mikdash. A person says, I want to give myself over to the Mikdash, some symbolic number, my value. And so the Torah talks about what is a person's value when he says, my value should be given to the Mikdash, should become holy. What does that mean? In other words, how do we translate that into numbers? We want to give some sort of a value. And it changes from men to women, and it changes over a person's life. When you're, in other words, it sort of starts low, gets higher when you're at your prime, and then decreases. And it also has the meaning, the term erech, is also used in the context of la'aroch. In other words, to set up. Like you can say, la'aroch shulchan, to set the table. Okay, la'aroch et ha-menorah. So you're preparing the menorah. And this will be important in what we'll see now. So, in the context of Elchin, the Midrash refers to another verse that appears in Tehillim, which says, where there's a verse, the verse says, the term aricha, the term la'aroch appears there. דבר אחר, כי מי בשחק יערוך להשם. The verse says, מי בשחק יערוך להשם, ידמה להשם בבני אלים. So the simple way, the pshat way of understanding this verse is, מי בשחק יערוך להשם, who in the sky, in the heaven, shall be compared to God. who can be valued, Ya'aloch, as God. And that's supported by the second half of the verse, which says, Yidmei Hashem bivnei Elim, will be similar to God in the sons of God, amongst the angels, okay, the sons of God, the godly children. Okay, so it's saying basically, who can compare to God? And indeed, if you look at the verse there, at the chapter there in Tehillim, you'll see that there's several verses there all talking about how great God is. The Midrash, though, takes this as a different way. Instead of understanding it as saying, oh, God is so great, it's saying, who in the heavens shall perform the event, the action of Elchim, the action of evaluating themselves and saying we want to give part of our value to Hashem. Okay, so let's see what the Midrash says. בשעה שביקש הקדוש ברוך הוא לברוא את העולם, הוא ביקש לברוא את האדם. When God created the world and wanted to create man, היו מלאכי השרת אומרים, מה אנוש כי תזכרנו. Here there's a quote that the Malachim used to say something at the time. Another quote from Tehillim, מה אנוש כי תזכרנו. This is a very famous verse from Tehillim, where it's sort of like one of these places where there's a sort of like two sides of the same entity. On the one hand, man is nothing. Ma enosh ki tizkarenu. There's nothing, to praise man for. He's nothing. He's not worth anything. You won't even remember him when he's gone. The verse after that says, that basically says that man is only slightly less than God. Okay, it says over there. The verse is. ותחסרהו מעט מאלוהים וכבוד והדרת תעטרהו. Okay, man is only slightly less than God. So the verse there is basically talking about two sides to man, how he can rise to great heights, but he also is, in the end, he can also be nothing. He can be an empty vessel. And it all depends, sort of on the context or on what man chooses to do. But here it's quoting this as being in the name of the angels, saying, what is man that you should remember him? What does he deserve attention? What do you want the man for? They say to him. God says to them, I need him because I need somebody to do the Torah. So they said to him, no, we'll take care of it. We will now perform your Torah. We'll do the Torah. God answers them, you can't. And you may think he's going to say, you can't because of what Moshe told them. Same thing. You can't because you don't have, you don't covet, you don't have parents. No. He brings a different set of mitzvot that they cannot perform. First of all, there's a whole section about Tuma and Tara, about purity and impurity, which talks about a person dying, and you don't die, so this is not relevant for you. It says there, a woman who shall become seated and then shall have a child. You don't give birth. It says there that you shall, this is the things that you shall and shall not eat, and you don't have food. You don't have, you don't eat at all. So those mitzvot aren't relevant for you. And so God concludes that he wants to create man because they can't perform the mitzvah. Now, the next thing God says is, how is this connected to Erechim? Okay, so the answer is, later on, God praises the people of Israel that they, when he gives them the mitzvot, they start performing them, and he uses the term erech in the two ways we talked about. One is la'aroch, to set up, just like in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, there was a table there with the bread, which was sort of like the lechem apanim, the face bread. Okay, so we would set that out for him. And the other one is Elchin that we have in our parsha, Elch Nefashot, which is basically the evaluation of our soul, of our spirit, which we want to give to the Mishkan. Okay, so in other words, the Midrash is saying, first of all, there's this discussion between God and the angels, and God tells them that they can't get the Torah because they can't perform the mitzvot. And the second part is about why Israel is good, because Israel does this erchin thing. Okay, we do these two things, the korbanot, and we give our value to the Mishkan. And the reason that it's focusing on this, just from the linguistic sense, is because of the same root, the erchin. Okay, and now we also understand how the verse was read, that verse in Tehillim, which we started from, Mi b'shachak ya'aroch la'Hashem. So if usually it means, the standard interpretation means, nobody, even in the heavens, can be equal to God. In this context, the Midrash is sort of reading that verse in a different way, saying, who in the heavens performs this action of alicha, either of setting up korbanot, or of giving your value to God. Okay, nobody in the heavens, in other words, the angels don't do these things. The people of Israel do these things, and that's why they deserve God's special favor. That's why they deserve to get the Torah. Okay, so that's the sort of the layout of the Midrash. The Midrash here, if you look there, you'll see there's a few more takes on that verse from Tehillim, but we will sort of focus on this one. In order to get a bit deeper into this Midrash, we need to understand what is the meaning of the mitzvot that were chosen. At the beginning, I quoted for you a section where Moshe chose certain mitzvot, and in fact, if you look at those mitzvot, what did he mention? He mentioned, God, believing in God. He mentioned, kibud avayim, respecting your father and mother. He mentioned coveting. What's common to all those mitzvot is that they're all from the Ten Commandments. So it makes sense. Moshe coming up to receive the Torah, the first things he receives are the Ten Commandments, and he says, "Look, even from the first 10 that I got, it's obviously not relevant for you." In fact, Moshe could have chosen any mitzvah. There's no mitzvah, perhaps except for prayer, and even that maybe is not a mitzvah. From in the Torah, Moshe, could have chosen any mitzvah and said, "Look, it's not relevant for the angels," because the Torah specifically focuses only on the issues that happen in this world. However, in our parsha, it's talking about other mitzvot. And so, what is the meaning of those mitzvot? And maybe we can use that, the change between these midrashim, to understand what the focus is in this midrash over here. What are the mitzvot that we talk about here? One of them has to do with impurity, but it focuses on impurity that's caused by death. Then we have giving birth, and we have eating. So in a sense, we have here the circle of life, right? Because we have giving birth, then we need to eat for a while, then eventually we die, right? So this is the circle of life, and God is saying, these mitzvot of the circle of life are done only by man. And this fits in very well now with the verse quoted as the argument of the Malachim. The Malachim said, as I quoted before, he quoted that verse from Tehillim, chapter 8, where it says, "Ma enosh ki tizkarenu, uben adam ki tivkadenu." What is man that you shall remember him? What does it mean, what is man that you shall remember him? It's not only that man is not good right now, you won't even remember him. He's here one day, he's gone the next. In other words, God is answering them in the same exact terms that they used. They said to him, what is it worth? Why should you give the Torah to God, to man? Torah is eternal. Man is temporary. According to the Midrash, the Torah was created before the world was even created. The world was created with the Torah in mind. But the Torah is eternal. It's sort of part and parcel of the God's essence. But man is temporary. And so God says, you're right. But the Torah, with all of its eternalness, talks about a temporary, temporal existence where, things change over time and man is created and he lives and he dies. And those things are not relevant for you. And so now we also understand, in a sense, some of the pun over here, without yet fully understanding what it means, but we can see, the next verses I quoted in Tehillim is, while man maybe can be here a day and gone the next, still there's something, beyond that about him. And so now we understand, like that verse that we started from, Mi b'shachak ya'aroch la'Hashem, it's saying basically, you angels, you thought that you're so great, look, man has something you don't have. But we still don't understand what is the significance of that. We would think that being temporary, being was really a drawback, right? And in a sense, that is what the Malachim thought. So, what is the meaning of the Midrash? What is this greatness that man has in that he's temporary, and that he's, I think the term is ephemeral, but I'm not sure that that's the correct term, so I'm just going to stick with temporary for this talk. The answer, I think, it lies in those things that man does. And because this parsha talks about Erchin, I'm going to focus on that aspect, not on the Korbanot aspect, which we have talked about plenty over the book of Vayikra. What is the meaning of Erchin? Well, let's first understand what the angels were saying when they thought that man's temporariness means that he's also not worth it. When you're a being that exists forever, things that are temporary, it's not just that they're temporary, they are non-existent. Mathematically, anything compared to infinity is zero. It doesn't compare on any scale. And in fact, if you look at a lot of the philosophies that have gone on even till today, what people are looking for are eternal things. They're looking to define constants in the universe, constants in the world or in the universe or in creation, and things that are temporary seem to be unimportant. So in the Middle Ages, people thought that God, not Jewish thinkers mainly, but non-Jewish thinkers believe that God, if he has any kind of relationship with the world, it's a relationship with a species, not with an individual. Because an individual is here one moment and gone the next, while the species is there forever. We see the species don't disappear. At least that's how they saw it. They didn't think in terms of, they didn't see certain species disappear like we do. But the logic was, the species are eternal, God is eternal, therefore he can have a relationship with those, but not with temporary things which are here one day and gone the next, like individuals. And that seems to be the argument of the Malachim. They're saying the Torah is eternal. It suits an eternal creation, which is us, the angels. We should get the Torah. What do you need this man? What do you even need this temporary thing? The thing is, what is God's answer? So I think that there's several ways you can understand this. This goes, one can go very deep here into the question of why God created man, but I'm going to skirt away from that deep philosophical discussion and just touch upon one angle which I think is nice, and you can go ahead and develop this idea even more according to your perspective. I think the problem with infinity is precisely what we said a moment ago, is that everything compared to infinity then becomes insignificant. And as such, it's impossible to value it. If you're going to live forever, then your life doesn't really mean anything, because it's not special. It's just one of those constants that's there all the time. But if you're going to eventually die, if you will be here and die the next moment, then what you do with that time is important. You can't do everything. You can't, if you live for an infinite amount of time, you can actually, for an infinite amount of time, do one thing, and then for another infinite amount of time, do another. And so, when you have an infinite amount of time, then nothing really makes any difference. But when you live for a finite time, what you do with that time means something. And this is expressed through Erchin, because when a person values himself, not only do we see that he is valued by his age, which implies exactly this circle of life, but the reason that he can value himself is because he's confined in time, and he can say, I want to give what I am, all that I am, to God. You can't say, I want to give all that I am to God when you are infinite. Of course, I'm not saying that God had no beginning. Perhaps the angels had a beginning, but no end. And so they can be infinite in that sense. But they're not infinite like God is. But when you are finite, then what you are and what you want is well defined. And so you can come along and say, I want to give that to Hashem. I want to come and say to Hashem, I want to make this symbolic gesture saying, take what I am worth, and I give it to you. The angels can't do that. They exist forever. So even if a moment of their time is worth 1 cent, they are worth an infinite amount of dollars. And it doesn't matter how small you give a value for 1 moment, it's always going to be infinite. There's no way to quantify the meaning or the essence of the thing. And so God is saying, you know something? What you lack and what you belittle, angels, is exactly what I love about humans, about what I created over here. In that humanity can come along and say, we want to give up what we are and give it all over to you. Yes, I won't take it, says God. I don't want you to kill yourselves and give your life for me in that way. Maybe in other contexts, I'll demand you to give up your life in my name. But if a person just is devoted to Hashem and wants to give himself over, I don't want you to die, says Hashem. But I appreciate the thought. And only you can do that. Angels can't commit suicide. Angels can't sacrifice themselves. Humans can. And so Hashem says, you know what? I appreciate the fact that you want to give your value over. This is what I want you to give. The Midrash definitely saw it this way, because the Midrash on the same verses also talks here about a completely different topic, which has to do with the Akedah, when Abraham, the binding of Isaac, and with Pinchas, who supposedly sacrificed his daughter because he committed to it. Meaning to say that when a person says, I want my value to be given to Hashem, he's saying, I want myself to be given to Hashem. That's the symbolism. I want to give my whole self. And Hashem says, I appreciate that. Just, I want you to live. So stick around. But that intent is meaningful. That intent is significant. Only humans can make that intent, because they have the circle of life. Because they start, live, and die. And that's what makes us so special, different from the Malachim. That's also why we are the only ones who can do the Torah, because the Torah is related to change and to evolving. And when you're infinite, that also becomes meaningless, because you're starting from some point, but you're never going to end up anywhere. There's never sort of a framework to tell a story and beginning and end. And so, to conclude, we saw over here how the Midrash took this verse in Tehillim and sort of reinterpreted it. Instead of saying, who can compare to God in the heavens, it's saying, who can compare to the people of Israel in the heavens? Yes, and the people of Israel are special. The people of Israel, or humanity, is special compared to the heavens. It's specifically that the fact that we are bounded by time and don't go on forever is what makes us being able to sacrifice. Okay, to sacrifice to Hashem. This is also again how it links into Vayikra and the sacrifices, the ability to give up something, to give up all that we have, all that we are for Hashem, is a right and is a privilege that only we have. And so, with that, I'll wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.